So, back in the summer of 2022, I was sitting at my very cluttered desk in my very messy office, which was on the second floor of a very old historic building. I will never forget that afternoon. I had a literal mountain of projects on my desk. I was trying to plan for the next season, specifically attempting to overhaul our homeschool programs. I was managing a team, and I was constantly monitoring the attendance numbers of our still new family programs. See, the year before, I had made the decision to end our summer camps and go all in on family tours instead. It felt a little unhinged, even though I was fairly sure it was the right call, but we were still navigating those post-COVID new normals, and I was seeking clarity on whether that was the right call. At the time, I was just starting to read a recently published book by one of my favorite museum researchers, Dr. John Falk, called The Value of Museums, which is a book I talk a lot about. So I'm reading this book and I read a sentence and it felt like a lightning bolt from the skies landed in my office. I actually repeat this quote so often that I have both the quote and the page number memorized. It hit me like a ton of bricks because right there in the book in black and white, he wrote, quote, parents perceive museums as a setting that allows them to positively fulfill their role as parents. In fact, they perceive that museums enable them to excel at this role. What I had known deep in my gut, what I had seen through all of my years of experience, was clearly supported right there with empirical evidence. Families choose to visit museums because of what it means to the family, not necessarily because of the content that we offer them. It might be the content, but there might be, and likely is, something more going on. So I just want that to sink in for a second. When our institutions are quite literally built around collections and content, what does it mean for us to create programs that aren't? That is what we're untangling today. If you have ever led a field trip on a tough subject, waited on a school bus that was 20 minutes late, or bounced straight from a toddler storytime program into an impromptu meeting with a board member, you're in the right place. I'm Rachel, a museum education researcher, consultant, and creative partner for small but mighty education teams who feel a little stretched thin, but know this job is worth it. This podcast is where museum education scholarship meets real-world realities, helping you reclaim your creativity, energy, and maybe even your lunch break. Welcome to the Modern Museum Education Podcast. Hi, welcome back to the show. If we haven't met yet, I'm Rachel, the founder of Modern Museum Education. I'm a creative consultant for small and mid-sized museums, helping them to create sustainable, strategic, and pedagogically sound programs for children and families that won't have them burning the candle at both ends. Before we dive in, a quick note. This podcast has been on pause for about 18 months. Between finishing up my coursework and some family priorities, I just didn't have the bandwidth to show up the way that I wanted to. But I'm really glad to be back and I'm excited to get things moving again. I have been spending a lot of time in recent weeks getting new episodes planned, researched, and recorded for you. But I've also been building a new way to share ideas and answer your questions in real time. But I will tell you more about that in a minute. Today, we are talking about why families actually walk through your doors. Now, there are a lot of ways to categorize visitor motivations, but most of us are familiar with John Falk's seminal work, Identity and the Museum Visitor Experience. I told you he was one of my favorite museum researchers. In his framework, he identifies five main types of visitors. So here's a quick refresher. His five types. Oh, and a caveat, in later works, he actually expanded this to, I think, seven types. But for the purposes of today's episode, the original five will do. So the five types in his original theory are explorer, facilitator, experience seeker, professional hobbyist, and recharger. Now, for family attendees, the three that show up most consistently are facilitators, explorers, and experience seekers. So those are our big three, and we're going to look at them a little bit more closely. Number one, facilitators, or you can think of these as like caretaker as teacher adults. These are usually parents, but they can be grandparents, aunts and uncles, any caretaker. So I always recommend that we never use the word parent. I like when I'm talking to family groups, I always like to use the word grownups because you can say, I need all the grownups to do this. Or if you're talking to a kid, you can say, where are your grownups? And that works just as well and is more inclusive than saying the word parent because not all kids actually attend with their parents. It might be foster parents or grandparents, aunts and uncles, close family friends, etc. So, okay, back to the main point, facilitators. These are the caretakers that desperately want to provide a learning opportunity for the kids. But here's the kicker. They often feel totally ill-equipped to explain the art or the history or the science or whatever content you have in your museum. They actually need you to make them look like the expert. Okay, number two are the explorers. These are folks that are driven by their own curiosity. And this can create a little tension because these are grown-ups who might be trying to balance their own desire to read all the labels with their children's desire to run towards the next shiny thing in the, adjacent room. And then there's the third group, the experience seekers who come in family groups who are specifically looking for a social experience. This is a big one. For many families who are visiting museums, learning is not their primary goal. Their primary goal is to spend time together, making memories and doing something that feels meaningful. Learning is happening, but it's not always the headline of their visit. And when we design programs and exhibits as if learning is their main objective, we are missing the mark. For families with this motivation, learning is actually secondary to memory making. They're really there to just be together. Now, before we go any further, because we are going to go deeper, if you're in the middle of field trip season or you're staring down a packed summer camp schedule and you're thinking, how am I supposed to make all of this work? I want you to know you don't have to figure it out alone. If you want to hear me go a little deeper into these strategies and how they play out for real museum programs, I want to invite you to join me in my brand new experience called the Engagement Lab. It is a free Telegram broadcast channel. So if you aren't familiar with Telegram, it's just a free messaging app. It's kind of like a private feed that you can subscribe to where you can join my channel and you can get updates directly from me. Each month, I drop a series of voice notes breaking down real engagement strategies and the research behind why they work. You'll also get access to that month's Q&A thread, and that's where you can submit a question and get an in-depth research-backed response that you can actually use. You can find out more and sign up at modernmuseumeducation.com/lab or at the link in the show notes. Okay, let's get back to the research on why families visit museums. John Falk is not the only researcher looking at this. For one, this is the subject of my dissertation. But since that research is ongoing, I'm going to highlight two other studies that I find fascinating. First up, a 2010 study that explored the decision-making process families use when choosing to visit a museum. So this study comes out of Taiwan, and the overwhelming majority of the families in the study reported planning out their museum trip as opposed to visiting on impulse. And for those who planned to visit, the researchers identified 4 patterns of decision making. So I'm going to explain them and then talk a little bit more about it. The first pattern was that a child requested it and the parents decided. The second pattern was that parents or grandparents consulted the child on their thoughts, but the parents or grandparents ultimately decided. The third pattern was that the parents searched out, consulted the child on their options, they kind of had a conversation, but then the actual decision maker was the child. And the fourth one was that the parents searched it out and decided amongst only themselves, and the children were not involved at all. Of those 4 patterns, a child requested, but parents decided. Parents consulted the child, but parents decided. Parents consulted the child and the child decided, or parents searched and decided on their own and the child was not involved at all. Guess which one was the least occurring of those 4 patterns? If you guessed the child making the decision occurs the least, you would be correct. But To be fair, it was a small margin. But the important thing to note here is that in almost every scenario, the adults are the gatekeepers. And even when the child chooses the museum, they're choosing from a curated list of options that was provided to them by the adults. Okay, the next study I want to highlight is a study out of Italy from 2021. And in this study, the researchers studied the dynamics of families who were attending the National Day of Families at the museum, which, time out. Why can we not have a National Day of Families at the museum in the United States? If I could just wish something into existence, that would be it. Maybe we can work on that together, and that can be our next big goal, is to establish a National Day of Families at the museum. Oh, it gives me chills just to think. Okay, anyways, back to Italy. They found that 80% of participants who came to museums on that special day, which was designed specifically for families, 80% of the participants were repeat museum visitors. This tells us that when we get the experience right the first time, we aren't just getting visitors coming through our doors, we are building community relationships. Okay, let's put all of this together. If the parents are generally the ones making the choice to visit, and they're often choosing based on how they perceive museums will help them excel as parents in both intellectual and social ways, and when there is a high chance that they will become repeat visitors, assuming their visits are positive, what should we be doing? One of the ways that I define museum education is information without struggle. And if there's one group of visitors who could use a little less struggle, it's the ones toting around water bottles and snacks and pacifiers and fidget spinners, right? So here are 3 practical ways that you can support family visitors. Number 1, scaffolding for the grownups. If the caretakers feel like they don't know what to say in order to facilitate the learning and the social connection that they literally came to you for, then they are going to assume that the museum experience was inadequate. And that is what we definitely don't want. So, what you can do is give them the words to say. Offer guided prompts, conversation starters, and well designed materials that support them in their efforts to lead families in learning and connection. We need to give caregivers the scripts or the tools that they need to feel confident. We want them to feel like the hero of the visit, not a confused bystander. By the way, if your current gallery guides or activities are really just like text on a page and they aren't really a bridge for connection, then we can fix that together. I have a scalable custom museum ready materials service that is designed to help you bridge those gaps in a way that is convenient, incremental, and budget friendly for you. You can find more details about that in the show notes. Okay, the second thing that you can do is to play the juicy question game. Now, this comes directly from a different 2010 study on how families learn together in a museum. And in this study, researchers developed a dialogue game called the Juicy Question Game, which encourages family groups to seek out information together. In short, this game models inquiry learning for family groups. And if you're curious on how to play this game, you can check out the show notes for the research citation, or you can join the Telegram channel where I'll be breaking down exactly how to play the game and how to apply its principles in your space. But back to the point, our aim should be not to directly tell families the right answers. Our work as museum educators should be to facilitate families talking to each other in a way that deepens their experience and allows them to discover answers together. And the third idea that you can apply today is to take advantage of threshold moments. Most families actually follow a pretty predictable pattern when they visit museums, which generally includes 2 short but really important parts of their visit. Right at the beginning when they enter, and right at the end when they exit. Thus the term threshold moments. So at the start, when they first begin their visit, the family is figuring things out. What are we doing here? Where should we go first? What's going to happen? What does this visit look like? And at the end, they're wrapping up. They're talking about what did they see? What did they like? They're shifting back to the outside world. These moments are huge opportunities for us. With something as simple as question prompts, visual cues, welcome and thank you messages, we can help families set a shared intention at the beginning and then reflect back on their experiences at the end. These kinds of activities are what turns a museum visit from something that a family just does together into something they actually really experience together. To wrap up, families are looking for connection first and content second. When we scaffold the experience for the adults and we lower the barriers for conversation, we meet families exactly where they are when they step in the door. Next week, we're going to get a little more tactical and we're going to take a practical look at designing activities specifically for families. Don't forget to check out the show notes for resources, links to the Engagement Lab, and custom services that will help make museum life a little easier for you. And in the meantime, friends, keep your research close and the craft glue closer. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for being here today. If this episode helped you, please subscribe, forward to a friend, leave a review, send me an email. It's all great ways to help other museum educators find the show and help me know how best to serve you. As always, you can find the show notes, the resources, and all the ways to work with me at modernmuseumeducation.com. I'll see you back here next time, and remember, your work isn't childish just because you work with children.